Welcome to episode number 108 of the Marine Layer podcast. It's a mailbag episode. We'll answer your best baseball and non-baseball questions on today's pod.
Here's your reminder before we start. Make sure to download those episodes if you're listening. Rate and review. Leave it 5 stars. Leave a written review too. All of it helps us out. If you're watching, click that big subscribe button. Like and comment on the YouTube podcast as well, where we do our video podcast. And check us out on social media, especially the upcoming weeks. We've got a bunch of spring training content for you. We're on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube Shorts at Marine Layer Pod.
Let's get it rolling.
The pitch from Acevedo. A drive deep to right field. Down the line. The Mariners win this game 2-1. The dream lives. They're going to the playoffs. 1-1 from Jansen. There you go. Left field. We got a tie ball game. Julio. Oh, baby, what a moment. Tie ball game in 7-7.
And we welcome you to this episode of the Marine Layer podcast, part of the Just Baseball Podcast Network, recording here on Sunday, March 3rd. When you're listening to this, Lyle and I will be at spring training, but for the time being, here on Sunday before we leave, we have a lot of really good questions to get to here on this edition of the podcast. I do really like the batch of questions we have here today. I think for the mailbags, this is the most diverse mailbag episode we've had.
Yeah, we got some really good questions. Like, if you're looking forward to, like you said, diversity and not just some really good baseball questions, but creative questions and some non-baseball questions as well, you're in for a good one this episode. But, dog, I do have to say, before we start, happy birthday.
Oh,
as
thanks,
of today
Doug.
on Sunday.
Thanks, Doug. Yeah, not my birthday on Wednesday, but on Sunday, yes. So the Mariners will be getting the newest version of TJ, the 26 version of TJ. I don't even know what to expect, to be honest, like what they're going to get. But, well, I guess we'll have to see.
Hey, 26 is the new 21.
Well,
No?
Judging how my 21 was,
Okay.
probably not.
All right. Well, fair enough.
I appreciate you looking out for me, though.
Yes. I will say, speaking of birthdays, when we get down to spring training, one of the questions I'm itching to ask, this one probably won't even be on social media or anything like that, but when we were done recording with Dom Canzone, we were talking about how him and I have the exact same birthday. We're both August 16th, 1997. And I asked Dom, I said, what time were you born at? And he said, honestly, I don't know. I'm going to have to ask my parents and get back to you. So when we get down to spring training, I'm going to ask him and see if he ever followed up on that, because I'm genuinely curious. I was born a little bit before 5 a.m. I'm guessing he wasn't born that early. So, yeah, I'm kind of itching to find out.
So how close would it have to be for you to feel weird about it?
If it's within an hour, that'd be pretty wild.
Yeah, that would be pretty wild. Let's get into these mailbag questions. Up first, this is a question we got on Twitter from @A_Stewart51. The question is, Lyle, would you rather relive a season through the lowlight tapes of 2022 Jesse Winker or 2023 Colton Wong? All recorded outs from the season are on tape.
Well, there's a couple different ways you could go about this. You could think of it as, do you put one of these guys on the 2024 roster, or do you think of it as you're going to go back and watch their seasons in the years they were with the Mariners? I looked at it the latter way, in the sense of Winker in 22, Wong in 23. If it's between those two, I would pick Jesse Winker, because look, he played some of the worst defense I think we've ever seen in the outfield at T-Mobile Park. That being said, he wasn't good at the plate, but technically he was above average. I know they traded for him to be a real impact bat, and he was not that, but he led the American League in walks. His WRC plus was over 100. I'm no Jesse Winker stan by any means, but between the two, I think I'd pick Winker, because by definition, he was slightly above average.
But who's the more useful player on a baseball team? I was trying to think. So when my answer to this question is, if I were to pick one of these two and actually have to physically rewatch their entire season again on this 2024 roster, it would be Colton Wong. As much as that pains me, it would probably be Colton Wong. I don't think I could make myself sit down and watch another season of Jesse Winker in the outfield. I can't do it. I physically cannot watch that man try and field another ground ball. So it would unfortunately have to be Colton Wong. Now, if I were to sit down and just watch the video, it'd be Jesse Winker because I'd be laughing my ass off of watching him try to field.
Okay, but Winker was on a team that got to the playoffs. I'm not saying he was the driving force, but he was on a playoff team. We know how frustrating 2023 was for everybody last year. So when you look at the teams you'd have to watch, I know the players on each team weren't that different. Like the core was still the same. But I feel like that and the advanced numbers at the plate, I feel like I'd still take Winker. I don't know, like as we've talked about, like Colton Wong, I mean, his defense was no Gold Glove level either last year. I think you're leaving that out.
No, I mean, no. But
Remember all the times he had to try to relay the ball in on a cutoff play from short in the outfield, and he'd like 3-hop it to the plate?
Yeah, I mean, we could take personality into account here too. I know Jesse Winker wasn't the most well-liked guy too, so that probably doesn't help with the clubhouse chemistry. Not like, and all these leaders on this team, JP, Cal, etc. Like, do you think they look at Jesse Winker and like the ultimate form of respect?
No. Oh, okay. If we're gonna go with personality, 100% Colton Wong. What resonates with me is not just how well-liked he was and how respected he was. Remember when we had Ty Pete on and he said Colton Wong sat down with him for a half hour and just talked baseball, life, like acclimating yourself into the big leagues, how to handle yourself one day as a big leaguer. If we're going to talk about the human being, the personality, Colton Wong, like by light years. I wish we'd gotten to know Colton Wong better in the time he was here last year, just as the person. I know he didn't have a good year, but he seems like just an ultimate good guy. So by that retrospect, for sure.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think if I just had to sit down and watch, it'd be Winker. I mean, what a unique season. He essentially turned into Raul Ibanez with more walks and less power. That's pretty impressive.
Remember I will say, if you wanted quotes to hang on to, though, it's Winker. Remember his interview after the doubleheader against the Nationals, where he said he's going to use Dylan Moore's Manscaped code between games or whatever it was?
Yeah. And my other favorite Jesse Winker moment, like my friend Caleb at the time worked at like a sports card shop, and he just randomly after a day game was like, "Oh, Jesse Winker came in today." He was like, "Oh, super nice guy." It's like, well, yeah, it sounds like Jesse Winker was as dedicated to his card collection as he was to his baseball physique. So look at that. That was pretty cool. I thought that was a kind of random moment. Never heard about Colton Wong going into a sports card shop.
Maybe he's not a collector. Not like our guy Justin Topa, or in this case, like Jesse Winker. So. Second question we got in the mailbag. This one's on Twitter. It's from Starcadian. He says, this is a unique one. If a sorcerer emerged out of left field and offered you a barter, which would grant you a super team composed of the best Mariners of all time in their prime for one season, but if that team failed to win a World Series, you would doom the team and franchise to another 20-year playoff drought. Would you do it?
Yes. Absolutely. Are you kidding me?
You would?
Well, they already missed it without a curse for 20 years. At least if they missed it for 20 years in a row this time, you know there's nothing you can do about it. And you know, the other way I thought about this is he essentially just like rehashed what 2001 was. The baseball gods came together to create the perfect baseball team for the Seattle Mariners. The perfect baseball team. And you know what the baseball god said after the 2001 season? Well, now your debt will be paid in a 20-year playoff drought. And that's what happened.
But how can you possibly say you're okay with living through another drought, even if you have all these guys on one field?
Because we're used to it already. That's why.
No. I cannot.
Because when they have tried to make the playoffs for 47 years as a franchise, it doesn't work. So at least when there's an external power keeping you out, you can just kind of shrug your shoulders and know that at least for one season, it might be the greatest season you'll ever watch, and you'll cherish those memories forever.
Let me make this as abundantly clear as I can possibly speak. I cannot and will not live through another 20-year playoff drought. Do you know how long 20 years is? As I like to put it, our first day of kindergarten till the day we graduated from ASU, We saw 0 postseason games for the Mariners. Not just that time span, it ranged longer than that. Our wavelength of thinking on this is totally polar opposite. Here's why I said I'm not taking that risk. The Dodgers exist. The Braves exist. Those guys have super teams every year, and they don't win the World Series. The Dodgers have won one. Okay, the Dodgers won once in 2020. The Braves won in 21. But the last couple of years, those two teams have had loaded rosters and lost in the first round. I'm not putting that to chance, even with Prime Junior and Prime Edgar and Prime A-Rod and Prime Randy Johnson. I'm sorry, I'm not. Because there's teams like the mid-'80s Win Diamondbacks that still get there. I'm not taking that 1-year risk on the chance to win the World Series if you know then you get a 20-year drought following. No, I'm taking the chances that they have now where you can just keep this core together and compete for a playoff spot every year. And if you get in, you're starting pitching, you ride with it. No, I'm not taking that risk. I cannot live through another 20 years, dude.
Well, it's either the option where you're guaranteed a great team, or we can live in the current reality where the thought of a great team just doesn't even enter the minds of the people in control of that. You can think about it that way.
But they could be a good team that gets into the playoffs, whether it's as an AL West winner or wild card, and they ride their starting pitching and see where it takes them. I'm taking that chance with the idea without the guarantee over your head that you are going to miss the playoffs for 20 straight years. I'd rather have the chance and the hope to hang on rather than knowing, well, you're going to miss for another 20 years. No, I can't. I cannot deal with that.
Man,
Can't do it.
Like it could you imagine the opportunity to live through that 2001 season? Could you think about that? Think of how amazing that summer would be. Could you think about that? 116 wins. This team could win more games than that. Would that not be the most fun you've ever had?
Okay, but just to get bounced in 5 games in the ALCS, again, the Dodgers won 110 in 2022. I think it was 110. Then they lost in the first round to the Padres. You know how disappointed and miserable you'd be at the crashing end of that season? Like, I can't do that. It would be really fun. I know what Jared Carrabis said the other day of, it's almost more fun to be a good regular season team than postseason team when we had him on 2 weeks ago now. But I can't. But what Carrabis is saying is like year over year, you're a good regular season team. The problem is the Mariners would be good one regular season, potentially get bounced in the ALDS or ALCS, and then miss for another 20 years. I'm not putting that to chance.
Man.
Can't do it.
Just the thought. Can we just think of what we built on our social platforms, what the all-time starting 9 would be? Because just think A-Rod at short, Edgar at DH, John Olerud at first, Prime Brett Boone at second. You have Robinson Cano coming off the bench.
Nelly off the bench.
Yeah, Nelly off the bench. In the outfield, you're going to have Junior, J-Rod. Oh, J-Rod probably now. Ichiro.
Yeah.
Jay Buhner. Those would be your 4 outfielders. Come on, you're telling me you don't want that? You telling me you don't want that?
Are you guaranteeing that they win a World Series with that team? Again, let me say again, 01 Mariners, 2022 Dodgers, and the Braves of the last 2 years.
I'm going to ask which team is going to beat Prime Randy Johnson, Prime Felix, and then who else is in that playoff
Freddie
rotation?
Garcia, Jamie Moyer.
Freddie Garcia, Castillo, Kirby, Edwin Diaz, Andres Munoz, Matt Brash in the bullpen.
Sasaki.
I don't know, 2014 Tom Wilhelmsen would be the worst member of that bullpen.
Dude, I can't put it. I cannot put it to chance.
I know you're dreaming. I know you're thinking about it.
Oh, I'm thinking about it.
Sounds like a pretty good team to me. I don't know who's beating that team. To be honest, that team's better than the 01 Mariners is. That's for sure.
Yeah, of course it is, because it is Prime Junior and Prime A-Rod and a bunch of other guys and Julio. But again, guys have off days, and if it's collective, they're going to lose. And then if they lose, they miss the playoffs for 20 years.
I think A-Rod and his spray tan powers will get it done.
I think we're going to have to agree. Yeah, unfortunately, I think we are going to have to lightheartedly agree to disagree on this, because there is like no scenario on earth that I would endure another 20-year playoff drought for. I cannot go through that ever again. Like, bottom line. Okay, before we get to our next question, let's talk to you about our friends over at Pagacci's Pub 85 over in Kirkland. We're going to continue to tell you about it because we love to hang out there. They have awesome pizza, not just pizza. It's a full food menu. They've got a full drink menu. They've got awesome specials. You can go play pool. You can go watch the games with your friends. Hey, there's spring training games on sometimes when the games are on TV. But with Mariners season coming up, I mean, guys, we're like just a few weeks away from it. You want a spot to go watch? Go over there. Hang out with your friends. It's a bunch of fun. And if you go during happy hour, you can get yourself some really, really great specials too. Those are from Monday through Friday. Happy hours from 2 to 6 p.m. It features $3 domestic beers, $4 Manny's Blue Moons, $4 Mac and Jacks, $4 Wells, and $4 house wines. All that is over at Pagacci's Pub 85 in Kirkland. Our third question comes on Twitter from James Roberts. He says, "This feels like an obvious one to ask, but I'll ask anyways. How good does Cole Young have to perform to make the team out of camp? Because he's looked really good and surely is better for second and third base duties than other in-house options." I will say, I understand what his thinking is long-term. I don't think at the current moment, with Cole Young having played less than 50 games above low A, he is currently suited better than the third base options.
Look, could I set the bar at 2004 Barry Bonds? If he did that, maybe they would consider. I was thinking along the lines of like how this could work. Do you remember Juan Soto's call up? You remember how small the sample size for him was above low A? I think he played 25 games above low A, something like that. I mean,
I think it was less. I thought he played like 10 or 15 games above A ball.
Yeah, it was not very many games. And he went up to the big leagues, and he was great right away. There was no issue for Juan Soto right away. He came up as a 19-year-old, had a 900 OPS as a rookie. It is, in theory, with the Juan Soto comparison, possible. But I'm thinking, like, in terms of spring training performance, I mean, even if he hit 500 and led the Cactus League in bombs, like, probably still not. Right, he would. They would start him in Double A, like instant off the bat, and they'd feel very comfortable about it. But Cole Young hasn't, like, looking at what Soto did and the kind of numbers he put up. Like, he slugged nearly 600 in Double A. He slugged over 700 in A+ ball. Like, Cole Young hasn't done that. So unfortunately, even though he's done very well in the minor leagues, he hasn't done well enough to say, I'm going to force your guys' hand to put me at the big league level. He could do that this year as a 20-year-old and go into Double A this year and start hitting 340 with an on-base percentage over 400 and slug, say, 600. Then the Mariners would really have a conundrum on their hands. At that point, you sit there and think, okay, are we making our team worse by not putting him on the big league roster? As it sits right now, I don't think so.
I'm sure you just misspoke, but I'm circling back to something. A+ ball? That, I think you mean high A.
It's just it means the same thing.
Well, of course it means the same thing, but you may have just coined a new term there. You should trademark it. A+ ball.
I don't think I could take ownership for that. I don't think I'm the only person who said A+ ball.
Oh, then maybe I'm just living under a rock, and that's the first time I've heard that saying. I would say your thinking is right. Also, I'm sure James in the question is just thinking in terms of like what the needs were entering the offseason. But obviously, when you think of your second and third base options, of course, Jorge Polanco, from where we sit, is a much, much better option at the moment than Cole Young. The only option would be either if Polanco slid to third and Young came up and played second, or if Young just started playing more third base and came up as a third baseman. But I think he profiles more as a second baseman anyway. And all that being said, you're talking about Juan Soto playing X amount of games above high A. Like, he played X amount of games in Double A. No, Cole Young has only played like less than 50 games in high A Everett. Like, he has not hit Double A yet. Juan Soto got called up from Double A. So I am all aboard the Cole Young train. If you've listened to some of the recent podcasts, you've heard me say, I think there's a real world Cole Young gets up by the end of the year. I'm certainly sticking by that with the way he's looked so far. But to make the camp out of spring training, playing about 48 games in high A, and that's the highest level he's played at 20 years old, just doesn't seem likely. Now, if you want to change or actually go ahead. Let me save that for later.
I was going to say, Julio Rodriguez is the second highest ceiling out of any prospect the Mariners have ever had, behind Ken Griffey Jr. He played an entire season in Double-A before getting called up. He crushed Double-A, but he played an entire season as a 20-year-old in Double-A. I have a hard time seeing Cole Young do it, at this moment, doing anything less than that to earn a call-up, I think.
I would agree with that. Now, I think if he keeps hitting like this, he's not going back to Everett. He's just going to start the year in Arkansas. But he would have to play really well in Arkansas to get a call-up even at the end of the year, which I think may happen. But you can skip AAA and go from Double-A to the majors. Some guys do that. Julio did it. You've seen other guys do it at certain points. Like Evan White did it. But I don't think you can go from high A to the big leagues at 20 years old. That's just too much of a jump. So I am very excited to see what Cole Young's done so far this spring. I'm almost positive he's not making the roster out of camp. I'll put it like that.
But if Cole Young goes and crushes AAA this year and the Mariners' third base situation does not get better, like let's say there's injuries or once the trade deadline rolls around, they have to go acquire a pitcher instead of an infielder, and third base is still a black hole at that point, or say Polanco goes over to third and second base at that point is a black hole again for what seems like the 20th year in a row without Robinson Cano or Brett Boone. Then you make that decision of what makes your team better in August and September, and we can revisit that. And then Lyle can parade around this podcast saying, I told you so, I told you so, I told you so, I was right.
I will be doing exactly that if Cole Young gets called up. I will say, though, if they're unsatisfied with what's gone on at third base by the trade deadline and Young's still not up, like if Cole Young gets up, for example, tail end of September, if the Mariners are making a playoff push, you see Cole Young get up, similar to how some other young high prospects have gotten up that way in the past. Like remember Xander Bogaerts got up really late in his rookie year and was on the playoff roster, or even Junior Caminero for the Rays last year was one of the top prospects in all of baseball, got up really late and was on the postseason roster for Tampa last year. You might see something like that with Cole Young. I was going to say, if it's the trade deadline, you can't trade for a bat and you need a solution, I think we might be looking at Tyler Locklear before we see Cole Young. And I mean by that, I'm not banking on this happening, but if you want to speculate theories for why Ty France is starting to not see third base reps, but have some buzz around him playing more third base again, it's that. Locklear is a first baseman, and man, oh man, does he crush baseball. So if they think the offense is going to need a spark in July or August, you might see Locklear out, because that's a college bat who's already been in Double-A, is going to start back in Double-A. And if he hits the way everybody thinks he's going to hit, he may be up mid-season.
What kind of numbers would you need to see from Cole Young to feel comfortable with him being on the big league roster this year? Not out of need, not out of forced need, not out of 2021 Jared Kelenic call up and save the day on the big league roster only for him to struggle all season. Like if you were to feel comfortable calling Cole Young up from Double-A because you feel like he's ready, what numbers do that? What does that look like?
So, AKA, the Mariners have legitimately had their hand forced. They say this guy cannot be in the minors anymore. He needs to help the big league club win games. I would say 140 to 150 WRC plus, has to be hitting 300 or above, probably.
It's got to be better. Like he's had good numbers in the minor leagues. He would need to exceed those numbers this season in the worst hitting environment he'll play in, period, in Arkansas. And right now his minor league numbers, despite the 400 on base percentage, the OPS has been anywhere from 800 to 850. And in the minor leagues, that's not a 140, 150 WRC plus. So, especially not in Double-A, it's going to need to be a little bit higher than that for us to feel more comfortable with him coming up. It's possible. Wouldn't put it past him. He's as talented as could be, but for the time being, seems unlikely. And I like your Locklear thing. Like at third base, that seems like more of a realistic option. So we'll have to see. It's up to the Mariners to decide what they're going to do here coming down the stretch in 2024 if they really need somebody in that spot. Okay, next question comes from Ellie at Trident Takeover. She sent us this on Instagram. The question is, if you had to choose a career outside of sports media, what would you choose?
This made my skin crawl because we've talked about this on the podcast, but I just hated school with a burning passion. I wasn't like the disruptive kid in class or anything like that, but I wasn't exactly attentive either because I was so bored all the time. All I wanted to do was talk about sports. So here we are. If I had to pick another career, what I came up with was probably taking the route of going into baseball operations, which is we have a couple friends who are in that field now and really like it and really enjoy it. I think if I wasn't talking about sports, it'd probably be that, because then you're still around baseball all the time. You're around the field, you're around teams, you're looking into numbers, you're just around baseball and you're living and breathing baseball. I think if I wasn't in sports media, it would probably be that, but it would still have to be something in sports.
You don't see any possible thing outside of sports that you could do? Like, would you own a gym? Could you own a gym?
Maybe, but like then you're getting into, I guess we've honed some skills in with this podcast that I probably previously never really thought we'd have to have, like having a little bit of marketing skill and sales skills. Like those are things we do with this podcast that I didn't really think I'd ever need back when we were in college. But I think it's another level when you talk about owning land property. Like that's a lot of work. That'd be great. But I mean, I've thought about the whole, like, would you be a personal trainer thing? Like I don't know if that's.
I feel like you could do that. A dietitian. Do you think you could be a dietitian? Because your diet's pretty good.
Maybe, but I feel like I've learned so much just from other people. Like I feel like I've learned just from kind of watching YouTube videos and seeing what other people do. I don't know about dietitian. Maybe. I would say more likely like something involving, because like I wouldn't say I'm some like fitness guru who goes around and like does a bunch of group classes and things like that. I kind of just do my own thing. Like maybe I do some one-on-one sessions with people, but I'd say that's much, much further down the totem pole if, I don't know, baseball didn't exist or something like that. So maybe like I guess I could see myself in like a real other alternate verse doing that and being somewhat satisfied with it, but I would say more likely than not it's going to be in sports.
Interesting. You know, I would say the same thing. I have a very different answer. I'm not sure if I've talked about this on the podcast. If I wasn't going to go into journalism and focus on sports in college, I wanted to be in tech. I wanted to be a computer science major. That stuff always really interested me in high school. Funny thing is, it's probably good I didn't. I don't know. I don't quite know if I would have cut it. Do you want to guess what my SAT score was on the AP computer science class? Do you want to guess?
I'm sure it was higher than mine. Well, I didn't take AP computer science, but I'm sure your SAT score was probably higher than mine. What was it?
No, not SAT. What the AP computer science test? What, like 1 through 5? You want to guess what the score was? 1. I thought I did great. I thought I killed it. I thought I studied my ass off. I thought I nailed the test, and I got a 1. And I was sitting there on my computer, just like flabbergasted at the score. I'm like, how is that possible? I got a 1? I was kind of pissed off. That class was about as hard of a high school class I'd ever had. That and chemistry. But I actually enjoyed the computer science. I enjoy building things, especially like on a laptop and tinkering around and sort of trying new things, which, you know, correlates into, say, video editing and creating content for this podcast, but in a different sense for computer science. So I was thinking that computer science would be a cool path to go down. Didn't end up happening. I'm obviously sitting here talking about sports with my journalism degree instead, but I thought that would have been cool. Now that I'm an adult, I feel like something travel related, something that would allow me to travel more than I do right now, I think would be a path. I don't exactly know what that would be. Lyle floated the idea of a flight attendant. In theory, a flight attendant sounds great. The problem is the customer service part. I don't know if I have the patience for that, dealing with other people that much, especially on a plane, like stuck in a metal tube with a bunch of 300 strangers for hours on end when they're hungry and tired and antsy, and there's crying babies, and who knows what will happen. Maybe the door will fly off on the plane as well, and you have to deal with that as well. So I'm like, I don't quite know if that would be it. A pilot sounds cool. The problem is the steps to being a pilot is a huge pain in the ass, and it is so expensive to get all those flight hours to become a pilot, especially a commercial pilot. Man, I don't know if I would have the wherewithal to get through all of that. So I guess that's my complicated answer. Tech, then something travel related.
I honestly have 3 answers to that because there's a few follow-ups. Number 1, TJ, everybody, as you can tell, makes really fiscally responsible decisions. He decided not to go into tech and be in sports journalism. So
Yeah. Well, so if I think about this, it's one industry that pays extremely well, but now just laid a shit ton of people off. So, I would actually, I'm still at least gainfully employed in this. If I was in tech right now, I could be unemployed. So at this very moment, though I would have pretty good unemployment benefits, I would say. So, yeah. Yeah.
that's fair. My other 2 follow-ups, one to the pilot thing. I mean, you should ask my brother about it because, I mean, my brother has his pilot's license and all that. Like, he flies planes. But to your point, it took him a long time. And like you said, it's a lot of hours.
Yeah, a lot of hours, really expensive. Again, I don't know if it's like the piloting specifically, but more of just like how I end up at the destination. If I'm going to I scroll on TikTok and I see these pilots documenting like, oh yeah, I just hopped to Australia. That was our international flight. Now I get to spend 3 days here. It's like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. And it's all paid for and work related. And you get to see the world for your job. And I think that's pretty cool. And you still have like a home base, you still have a house and live somewhere with a family and all that stuff, but you also get the plus of going out on the road and hitting all these spots and super cool. And that was kind of one of the reasons I got into sports. Cause like once you make it to the top level, you get to travel all over the place for sporting events and such. Haven't made it there yet. The farthest I've gone on the road for a sporting event is down the road to Eugene. That's it. But we're working up. We're taking baby steps.
Well, by the time this podcast is out, that'll change. You're traveling to Arizona, technically.
It's true. That is true. Yeah, that is true. So, one step at a time. It is still a little bit early, but we'll make it.
Early, but like I said, like obviously long term, we hope to do a lot more stuff with this if it keeps, if it keeps building up and everything. Like we said, I think it'd be pretty cool to go to the winter meetings a lot and keep going back to spring training and whatever else could kind of pop up. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have a better one. If they send the Mariners to say like Japan, Korea, or the UK, or I think they might play a game in France or something. Whatever. I know you're not a huge international traveler, but if we're making the moolah by then, like let's go.
I'll be honest, for that I would do it because it would probably be a pretty cool experience to see the Mariners in a different place like that.
And I think I could change your mind on travel at that point. Once we actually go experience it and you put a smile on your face and you're like, actually, TJ, I think that's a good idea. We should do this more.
Last thing I will say, and then we'll move on to the next question. But standardized tests, to your point about taking the SAT, they're not only are they the worst, but they're so outdated. Like so much of the school system just outdated as a whole. And maybe I'm biased because I was an atrocious test taker, aka like, I mean, I didn't get like a 100 on the SATs or anything ridiculous like that. I don't even think you can get a score that low, but I just wasn't, getting flying colors scores on standardized tests. So, and I wasn't good at taking them. So,
yeah. And there's all sorts of problems with standardized tests too. Like for someone to have a test score that high, the amount of money, like it all boils back to money, funny enough, with everything in this country. But like, the amount of hours and like tutoring and training you have to do to like get those high SAT scores, like not everyone can achieve that. Not everyone has the time to do that. So like it kind of sucks. And notice how like during the pandemic, when they just canceled the SATs, the world didn't crumble.
Right. Or some people are just naturally really good test takers, but I certainly was not one of those people. And also, at least for me, I can tell you, I have learned so much more in my lifetime just watching YouTube videos and learning that way, like watching in a shortened form and then doing, rather than sitting for weeks and weeks and weeks on end at a desk being attempted to learn something I didn't care about, and then paper plops on your desk and say take a test on it. So yeah, anyway, I could go on a rant about that forever, but change the schooling system. Okay, next question, another fun question. This one comes from, I want to make sure I get the name right because we got it, I don't want to say late, but it was like we found it a little bit later on. We're like, oh, we should talk about this one. This is from Orla McCaffrey. This is on Instagram. She says, best spot to watch the sunset in Seattle. What's yours?
So I have a great spot for this. It is on Queen Anne. Here's my directions to get there. The park's name itself is called Marshall Park. So Marshall Park is right next to Cary Park. Everyone knows, I assume, if you're a Seattleite or you're a Seattle area person like Lyle, or you visit Seattle and you need to go to a sightseeing spot, I'm pretty certain you know what Cary Park is. Cary Park is on Queen Anne Hill. overlooks the skyline, overlooks the Puget Sound. You can see the ferries, you can see the Olympic Mountains. It's nice. It looks, southwest-ish, more south than west, but it looks southwest. And I'd say the sunset from Kerry Park is fine. But if you're at Kerry Park and then you turn right on Highland Drive, which is where Kerry Park is on, and you walk all the way to the end of the street, walking west, you get to Marshall Park. And Marshall Park is right next to 8th Place, I believe. And 8th Place runs right along this just top edge of Queen Anne Hill, and the just nicest houses ever that are worth multi-millions are up there, right? And they're all gated off. But there's this really nice walkway too along this along 8th Place, and you can look straight out west. You see the Olympic Mountains, and you see the sunset there. I took friend of the pod, Victor Wren, there after our freshman year of college. We walked up there during the sunset, and it was gorgeous. You can see everything. You can see the sun like sort of fitting in between the mountains and Magnolia, which is the hill across from where Queen Anne Hill is. And it's spectacular. I think it's a fantastic spot to see a sunset. Little niche, and again, not the most popular park on that street, but if you want a sunset, I couldn't recommend that more. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, I've never been. I have another spot to check out because I've certainly been to Kerry Park, but never Marshall Park. Yeah, Victor, who we've mentioned him before, he made our YouTube background. He's done a few different things to help us out. Where he does a bunch of video editing, and that's his job, and he's really good at it. So that is what he does. No, he does. Well, he does a variety of stuff with Under Armour. I know, but yeah. So anyway, my favorite spot to watch a Seattle sunset it's got to be Gasworks Park. Maybe that's a cliche answer and a basic answer, but I know you see the water at Kerry Park, but the fact you're literally right on the water at Gasworks, and like especially when it gets to nighttime, like after the sun sets, and you have the skyline kind of like lighting up the water, and you got a perfect view of the Space Needle and the Columbia Tower. I love Gasworks Park. I think that, especially on a nice day, love that view. Like Kerry Park's great. Personally, I like Gasworks better.
I love Gasworks too. I mean, that's a spot for us Seattle kids, I like all the time that we would be at. Sunset wise, I was thinking like the sun gets kind of blocked out there, which is why I was thinking. I know it lights up the sky and looks nice, but I was just thinking, I'm like, well, the sun kind of tucks behind Queen Anne when it's going down at that point, because Queen Anne is directly west of Gasworks Park, and it would drop behind there. But for sunset, still a very good place to go, especially during the summer. It's warm. You can see the whole skyline. You can see all the boats out on Lake Union. It's super, super, super nice. And it's a good spot. Through the years, I'm just thinking when I went there during high school, and we'd do all sorts of hooligan shit. I'll just leave it like that at Gasworks Park, and then how it's sort of grown over the years, and still one of the best spots to go to.
Yeah, be on the lookout for TJ of all people. That's how we should put it. No,
have you ever been up on the gas structure?
Like climbed up it? No, I think it's gated off.
Yeah, I have once. They do some. They do. They made it a little harder, I believe, now. But yeah, it's an interesting. It is. Well, yeah, you got to find a way through it. It always has been gated off. You just got to find a way through it. So but like the view, I'll say the view up there at night is unbelievable.
That honestly might even be more it than the sunset. Like after the sun goes down and it's dark, but you have the whole skyline lighting up. Yeah, I love it. So yeah, no, those are good places to watch a sunset. Okay, I'll throw it back to you now to get through some more of these questions, but I will say the next few are definitely Mariners related. I thought the last few we got were some fun non-Mariners related ones, but it's a mix of everything in this mailbag.
The next one comes from Evan Holmes.17 on Instagram. The question is, who will be the Mariners' most valuable hitter not named Julio Rodriguez?
I went with Mitch Garver for this. As everybody knows, the DH position has been a disaster since Nelson Cruz left. And I don't think that's an unfair statement. Last year, it was a turnstile constantly. They couldn't find a solution there. Now they've got one. And not only do they have a solution at DH, but it's a solution at DH for a guy that put up a 138 WRC plus last year. I know it was in a shortened sample size, but that was higher than Julio's. That was higher than JP's. That was higher than the rest of the team. Mitch Garver is vitally important to the Mariners in 2024 and beyond. Because if you have a true DH you can plug in there almost every day, who's providing pop, getting on base, not striking out, this lineup's going to look so much different. I will say Ty France is probably a sleeper for this, especially if he bounces back. But who's my pick non-Julio wise to be the most impactful? Garver.
And I'm going to go off a similar train of thought, but at a different position. And I think Jorge Polanco. First off, because if we're thinking like literally like who is going to be the most valuable hitter besides Julio Rodriguez, well, it's probably going to be one of the guys hitting behind him. You mentioned one of the guys hitting behind him, Mitch Garver. Another guy who's going to be hitting behind him is Jorge Polanco. Jorge Polanco, based off the past production over the last 4 years at second base, I mean, I would imagine if he's healthy this year is going to be like one of the most valuable players on the roster just because of the production at that position in the past. Like, what happens if the Mariners get a 125 WRC plus at second base after years of like an 80 to 70 WRC plus at second base? It is unbelievable the amount of value that carries on this roster. I was thinking that if JP were to replicate or even exceed his 2023 season in 2024, that's an option. Now, as of right now, I don't think that's going to happen for JP. So instead, I'm going to count on more of a progress from Jorge Polanco playing a full healthy season with the Mariners this year instead of anticipating JP is going to set a new career high after blowing his old status quo for offense out of the water last season. So I think you and I took similar trains of thought to arrive at different answers, which I think is good and shows you the depth of this roster.
Yeah. Look, for how much second base and the DH spots have struggled the last few years for the Mariners, think about what happens if both Garver and Polanco hit that well. I mean, think about it. The Mariners missed the playoffs by 2 games last year. They won 88 games and had virtually no offensive production from second base until Josh Rojas got there. And then virtually nothing for a lot of the year at the DH spot. In spurts, you had it with Mike Ford. Imagine if you have Jorge Polanco and Mitch Garver both on the field and put up a 120 to 125 WRC plus. That is a team that, again, you heard me on a previous show recently talk about the Mariners can win the West. If those guys do that and the rest of the lineup hits, like, why not? Think about how much better that makes your team. It makes it monumentally better. So, oh, and let me add this last thing too. When TJ talks about the fact that he doesn't know if JP is going to repeat what he did last season, I think all TJ means by that is maybe he doesn't put up a 134 WRC plus again. He could still be from 120 to 125. And in fact, I think that's right where he will be, which, by the way, that's a really good season. Just maybe it's not 134 again. Yeah,
like just think about it this way. In the previous career high for JP before last season was 103, and then you jump up to 134. That's a pretty big jump, and usually that's about as big of a jump as you can get in offense in a season. So now if you were to jump from 130 to 165, then you and I are going to sit here and reconsider in season.
If he does that, JP might win the MVP.
Yeah, win the MVP. And well, the question wouldn't be besides Julio, it would be besides JP.
Yeah, there you go. All right, next question, another fun one. This comes from WB.Ryan36 on Instagram. He says, who is your favorite player on the Mariners that isn't actually that good? So we took the approach of this in picking an all-time Mariner that fits the mold of this question. And there are a lot of answers you can go with, but I'll flip it to you first.
Because I was trying to think of like a current version of a current Mariner who I loved that wasn't actually that good. And then I'm like, well, all the Mariners that weren't actually that good end up being like essentially Abe Toro, who I don't like. So that doesn't work out. Do you remember the first 2 months of the Nick Franklin era in 2013? It was dreamy. Man, when he came up, I mean, I thought that dude was going to be an all-star. Like he was stud. I remember me, my brother, and my dad sat at the kitchen table that year, and we were thinking, okay, who is going to be the next Mariners all-star infielder? Is it going to be Nick Franklin, Brad Miller, or Kyle Seager? That's the level of discussion we were having about the early stages of Nick Franklin's career with the Mariners in 2013. And he had nearly an 800 OPS as a second baseman in the first half of 2013. And then in the second half, he hit under 200 and then eventually got left off the roster, bounced around for a few years in the big leagues before retiring. But his early stages were amazing. I was like, wow, the Mariners don't get good players like this.
Do you remember just the pattern that Mariners shortstop prospects had for a while? Because that happened with Nick Franklin. Then Brad Miller tore it up for half a year when he got up. And to be fair, Miller's had a 10-year big league career, and he's had some good spurts when he was with the Mariners. But then Chris Taylor came up, had a really good season, and then didn't really do anything. And Ketel came up and had half a really good season, and obviously they traded him away. He's been great with the Diamondbacks, but that was a trend for a while, and it's all started with Nick Franklin, who was a huge prospect. Unfortunately, didn't do much.
Shocker. Wow, I wonder how they evaluated him. What were Jaxie's checkpoints, batting average, and RBIs, and
the man literally said home runs and RBIs.
Nick Franklin's my answer, though. That was to say special first half of 2013.
Mine's a deep cut, but I've talked about him on here before briefly. Carlos Piguero. Loved that dude. Absolutely loved him, which didn't make much sense because he didn't have any sort of big league career. But you know what? Those Mariner teams in the early 2010s were so bad that you had to have something to hang on to that was fun and gave you energy. And you know what it was for me? Every time Carlos Piguero stepped to the plate, you knew once in every 20 or so at bats, he was going to absolutely pummel a baseball. And, there were some spurts where he did just about that. Honestly, maybe it was less than every 20 at bats. But even still, you knew once in a blue moon, he was going to absolutely rocket a baseball into orbit. And he would. You would see him hit tape measure bombs every now and then. Love the guy. I mean, he was big, he was strong, everything. So never did much, but I'll tell you what was I looking forward to in the early 2010s? It wasn't winning games. It was seeing Carlos Piguero at bats.
I had another idea for this question, which was Russell Branyan, but he was actually kind of good for the Mariners at points. So I don't know if he would have really qualified.
No, he had one big year. That was in 2009. So yeah, I don't think Branyan qualifies.
Yeah, it was a thought. He was a lot of fun to watch. Overall, as a baseball player, probably not great, but at least with the Mariners he was, so didn't qualify. But shout out to Nick Franklin. He's on my Mount Rushmore of what could have been alongside Brad Miller, Dustin Ackley. Oh, they all played on the same team together. Funny how that works out. Okay, before we get to our next question, let's hear a word from our friends at BetterHelp. Is something interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals? Regardless, if you have a clinical mental health issue like depression or anxiety, or you're just a human who lives in this world who's going through a hard time, therapy can give you the tools to approach your life in a very different way. And that's why I'm excited to tell you about today's sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp's mission is to make therapy more affordable and more accessible. And this is an important mission because finding a therapist can be really hard, especially when you're limited to options in your area. BetterHelp is a platform that makes finding a therapist easier because it's online, it's remote, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to a professional therapist in as little as a few days. It's easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. There's a link in our description. It's betterhelp.com/marinelayerpod. That's betterhelp.com/marinelayerpod. Clicking that link helps support this podcast, but also gets you 10% off your first month of BetterHelp so you can connect with a therapist and see if it helps you. So if you're struggling, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in the description or visit betterhelp.com/marinelayerpod. Next question coming from Tyler D. Millard on Instagram. Which players do you think make the opening day lineup, and how many of them will still be here in October?
So projecting the opening day lineup's going to be a little bit tough because obviously there's some platoons involved. Now, if you were to assume that Brian Bayo or Lucas Giolito was going to start opening day for the Red Sox, you would assume it would be some left-handed bats. So it would probably be Rojas over Urias. If Urias is even healthy, it would probably be Dom Canzone over Mitch Haniger. But the starters are all the same. Like Haniger's going to get playing time. Urias is going to get playing time if he's healthy. Again, platoons take a factor into this. Still here in October, unless there's injuries, which of course is possible. Like if a player gets injured and is not on the field in October because they're on the IL, that's always a possibility. But in terms of being out of the organization, I don't know if there's many guys that are currently projected to be in the opening day lineup that would be off the team. I don't think there's that many. Maybe the one guy is Urias at third base. Like, for example, if he's not playing well, or if he is hurt for a while and the team tries to move on and do something else or something like that. Because again, there is a chance he starts on the IL if he can't throw the ball. Maybe him, but I don't think there's a lot. I think most of the guys that they've traded for or they already have in house, they're envisioning as being core pieces of the team.
I think opening day lineup would be for the most part the same, barring an upgrade at the deadline. But if I'm going to say overall opening day roster, would the number 6 different players make sense? I was thinking about it this way. There's going to be turnover in the bullpen. There is every single season, that, especially with this current iteration of the Mariners. There's been like 3 to 4 guys at least that have cycled out over the course of the season in the bullpen. So there's those 3 to 4. One starter, potentially, it could be Emerson Hancock in there over, let's say, Brian Wu either gets hurt or reaches his innings limit and they slow him down a little bit. So there's like one starter, and then I would say one player on the bench once you reach October. That could be swapped out. It could be as simple as a Sam Haggerty being put in there, or it could be when you add a position player and you bump, say, Demo down, and that bumps the next bench player down to something like that. As of right now, especially now that they have 4 outfielders they feel confident in, that's probably the outfield probably stays the same, and the infield as of right now probably stays the same, since Urias, who could get swapped out, or even there could be some world Josh Rojas really doesn't do that well this year, and if they really need to make a push, they would consider it. But at this very point, more unlikely than not. The only position player, Lyle, I could truly see being added in season would be a backup center fielder, because to be honest, they don't have a backup center fielder right now to back up Julio. So that would be like one guy. Otherwise, it's just kind of hard to see at this moment.
That's actually a good point. If Julio, heaven forbid, goes on the IL at some point this year, or just has off days, or is day-to-day for a few days, yeah, who is playing center field? Like, I would think maybe, or I was going to say, if it's an actual situation where they have to make a roster move, you can call Cade Marlowe up. He could certainly play some center field. But if Julio's day-to-day, for example, or has an off day, I don't really know of this outfield group who's playing center field. I mean, Mitch isn't. Dom isn't. Rayleigh, I don't really think is. I don't know. Maybe it's Demo. Maybe it's Haggerty.
Yeah, it might be Demo, or they probably have to call Cade up.
Yeah, that is. I mean, obviously, most teams do not find positions to back up their superstars like intently, but you do have to have somebody that can stand out there and play some competent defense out there if Julio's going to have off days, or again, hopefully he never hits the IL, but if he were to, then yeah, that's a good point. Okay, we got 2 fun questions to wrap this one up. The next one comes from Eternal Bichette on Instagram. He says, favorite ballpark food?
I had to think long and hard about this one, only to come to the most basic answer ever. Just I like a good cheeseburger at a stadium. I think stadiums can do every different stadium you go to can have a different version of something you like, whether it be a different company that makes the burger or a different style of burger, depending on what city you're in. For example, I think of T-Mobile Park, like Kid Valley, if we're thinking chains, I think has good burgers. But if you want more of a niche chain burger, Great State, when they were in the ballpark, I thought had the best food in the park. Unfortunately, they're not there anymore. They were down there in the pen, in the corner behind the masses. I thought that was my favorite meal while they were there, but they're unfortunately not there anymore. So I think a burger, I think it's the most easy to replicate throughout a stadium, while also getting some uniqueness city to city, ballpark to ballpark. But overall, my favorite thing to consume at a ballpark is beer, because there's a lot of beer and there's a lot of different beer all over the country. So I think that would be the easiest one for me. Yeah.
Do you have a go-to beer you usually get at the ballpark?
Well, I like the Mariners value beers. I think that is an incredible concept in a ballpark, especially, we're in our mid-20s. We don't, if we can, not shell out $14 for a beer, or like we were at Citi Field a year and a half ago, or my brother and I each spent $16 on a tall boy. It's a bit much. I would rather go like value beer where you can buy two at a time and you can get two $6 beers for $12 and take them both back to your seat and enjoy. And throughout the game, you don't have to go during happy hour or anything like that. I do like Bodie, Rubens beer, Rubens Brewing in Ballard. Shout out Ballard. So support the home neighborhood a little bit, and it's good. But there's a lot of good options. T-Mobile has among the best beer options in all Major League Baseball. So it's a real treat to be able to do that. So that's my answer.
Well, not just beer. T-Mobile Park has maybe the best food options in Major League Baseball. Like, they have unreal food. I would say, okay, so my favorite all-time ballpark food is Dippin' Dots, which, that's what I always got when I was a kid. Funny story. I mean, if you just want to peek behind the curtain, me growing up going to Mariners games, I don't know why we ever established this and put it in place, but it was something we always did growing up, that always in the 6th inning, my brother and I would usually go like with my parents, and we'd go get Dippin' Dots because we loved them. We wanted to get dessert at the game. That's what we would do. And I feel like I usually got cookies and cream Dippin' Dots, although I would often venture out into some other flavors too. So all-time favorite food at the ballpark, I'd say Dippin' Dots. Favorite food at T-Mobile Park, like especially that I've tried over the last couple of years. There's a couple sandwiches from Marination that I think are really good. Like that barbecue pork sandwich I had was really good. Or that it was early in the year. It was those games in April you and I were at. I tried that barbecue brisket quesadilla that was down at Edgar's. That was really good. I would say one of those two foods would be my favorite T-Mobile Park food, stadium-wise.
Edgar's has some really good sandwiches. I forget what they're called. Just blanking. Ballard Pizza Company always has really good food at T-Mobile Park. I like that. And there's some more creative options too. Like Charlie's Cheesesteaks is also pretty solid for ballpark fare. And then Moto Pizza, I think, is like you had it. It's pretty good. Just very expensive in the ballpark.
Yeah, here's the problem with Moto Pizza. It's really expensive. It's always a super long line, and it's fine. I'm not going to say it tastes like Little Caesars or something. Like, it's probably a step up from that, but it's, especially when you have East Coast roots like the two of us have, and you get accustomed to having like New York pizza and stuff, it just doesn't really compare, Moto Pizza. So I usually venture out into other options at the ballpark, probably than Moto Pizza, but I did get it to try it.
And I'm sure the brick and mortar place is a little bit better than the stadium one. Like, give them credit. I know their brick and mortar place probably still has a month-long wait line to get it. But if you can't even like match Pagliacci, then like you probably shrug your shoulders. And I would just, in the ballpark, rather just go to Ballard Pizza Company because it's probably better than Moto Pizza, and you could get your pizza way faster. So
you can get the calzone, like CAL, all capital letters.
Yeah,
like you can get that, or you mentioned Charlie's Cheesesteaks. So early in the year, TJ and I were doing some food reviews. We kind of stopped doing them as the season went on, but TJ got one of those cheesesteaks, and I remember he near got it all over himself trying to try it. It was huge. It was filled up, and he was like trying to get the big bite in without spilling on himself. Yeah, like you get a lot of food if you go there.
Yeah, it was a mess. And I mean, Din Tai Fung in theory is probably maybe the best overall restaurant they have in there, but not like the ballpark version of it.
Yeah, so if I was going to go to Din Tai Fung, you'd probably just go to the restaurant, I feel like my family and I used to. So that was always my brother's spot to go for his birthday. He loves it. So we would go at least once a year for his birthday. So I feel like if I was going to go, I'd just go to the restaurant, then go to the ballpark.
Right. Yeah, it's a good point. I can't think of, I'm trying to think of anything in like any other ballpark I would have that could top what I chose. Like off of the hamburger point, apparently like the Yankee Stadium, like Aaron Judge burger is supposed to be unbelievable. Like Wagyu patties, like it looks unbelievable. And if I'm sure I took a bite of it, I don't think anything else could top it across the country. Unfortunately, again, they sell 100 of them per game or 99 of them per game. I think it might be 99.
It's 99.
Yeah, 99 of them per game. So yeah, it's probably a little difficult to get your hands on. But I would say that would probably end up being the number one thing if you could manage it. I couldn't think of anything else. Yeah.
The last thing, and then we can get to our final question. I remember we got recommended when we did our cross-country drive from Seattle to the Cape League before our second summer calling baseball games in the Cape Cod League. We went to go see the Pirates in Pittsburgh at PNC, and people were raving about that Primanti Bros sandwich. Like, what was the hype? I tried it. I didn't think it was very good.
No, that was so tasteless. I think I would prefer going to the brick and mortar over the PNC Park location. I feel like the brick and mortar place would be good, but it was a sandwich filled with French fries. It was just like a load of carbs. I didn't think the meat was very good either. So I'm with you. I was like very disappointed in that sandwich. I had my expectations set a lot higher. I've had some very good sandwiches in my life. Unfortunately, that was not one of them. So I would, if I'm ever back in Pittsburgh, I'd like to try the actual place and then give it a fair review instead of a rain delayed French fry and whatever meat sandwich. Do you remember what the meat was in there? I don't.
Was it not just chicken or something? I don't even remember.
No, I couldn't even tell. It felt like a sausage patty, but.
For those who don't know, Primanti Bros is one of the Pittsburgh staples. It's a sandwich shop. They do some really unique sandwiches. Again, they put French fries in a lot of them. But yeah, the ballpark, could have been a lot better.
Yeah. Okay, let's wrap it up with our final question here of this mailbag. This is asked by, I got to look here because it's very small, Eric Schultz. He left us a comment on YouTube. What is your favorite baseball and non-baseball movie?
Favorite baseball movie? The problem is I love all of them. There's going to be so many I leave out. If I have to pick one, it's probably Moneyball. But I legitimately love every baseball movie that's been made, or just about. So Moneyball is my favorite. I will say, for those who haven't seen 8 Men Out, I could not recommend it enough. Because when people think of baseball Mount Rushmores, 8 Men Out never gets put on there because you have The Sandlot, you have A League of Their Own, you have Major League, you have, there's so many other movies that come to mind first for people. But 8 Men Out is, and all those movies I just mentioned are great, but 8 Men Out really tells the story of the 1919 White Sox and how they threw the World Series, and then there was, the trials for it, and then they hired the first commissioner of baseball, and then they get banned from baseball. It's super interesting, and I think it's really well done, but for whatever reason, it's not one of those Mount Rushmore baseball movies everybody thinks of. So favorite's Moneyball, but if you need a baseball movie to go watch and you potentially haven't seen it, I recommend 8 Men Out big time. So
my favorite baseball movie. Oh, so actually, before I get to my answer, what's your favorite non-baseball movie?
Oh, well, there's 2 ways I could go about this. So I love a lot of really stupid movies. Like when people ask me what my favorite movie is, it's probably either Happy Gilmore or Step Brothers, which maybe is right up my alley. But if you want to get away from that, as you know, as people who listen to this podcast know, TJ and I both really love Star Wars. So the Star Wars movies, the Marvel movies, especially those Avengers movies, those are probably them. If I had to pick one Star Wars movie, might be episode 3 or episode 5. So one of those, but now I'll turn it back to you.
So my favorite baseball movie is Moneyball because I love the front office aspect of it. And it's just really well done, even though they kind of, left out the fact the A's had the 2002 AL MVP, but I digress. And a Cy Young and the best rotation in baseball. Anyways, so that was a good movie. I thought it was really well done. Jonah Hill, Brad Pitt, phenomenal. Great job. Non-baseball movie is I'm thinking between 3. First one is Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, of Star Wars. One of the best movies ever. Acting is excellent. I could recite a lot of the lines. It's deep, detailed, emotional, the most fleshed out Star Wars film there is. It peaked then, went downhill after, unfortunately. Next up, another Star Wars movie, Rogue One. One of the most underrated movies I feel like ever. The story is great. The cinematics of it. It takes the older Star Wars stories, the story building and the thought process and the character development and all of that, and then paired it with the cinematics and the sort of visual greatness of the new movies. And it was the perfect combination. The Death Star in 4K HD, fucking incredible. Amazing. So, and once you like catch up on all the Star Wars lore and you watch the cartoons and you watch, say, like Andor and all this stuff, and you get tied into all the other characters they feature in that film, like Saw Gerrera and Cassian Andor and others, and continues on and on and on and on. Super cool. And then the last one, if I want like a laugher, Caddyshack. Like I will argue the most quotable movie of all time is Caddyshack. If you sit me down to watch Caddyshack, I could probably quote the whole movie. You can like find a quote from the movie for every situation in real life. It is that funny. And this is coming from someone who doesn't like old movies. That one is a classic and one of the best ever.
I'm taking Happy Gilmore over Caddyshack. Sorry.
Have you ever heard about Ty Burrell's round of golf with the Dalai Lama? It's amazing.
The problem is, I mean, I really do need to sit down and watch Caddyshack again, start to finish, because I've only seen it in parts. I need to watch it all the way through. But I was even trying to think of other movies for the two of us that we could even rattle off here, because I knew with the two of us, it was going to be sports movies, it was going to be, comedies, and it was going to be probably Star Wars. Like, I mean, the only other ones that come to mind are probably other comedy movies. Like, I like Wedding Crashers a lot. I think that's a really good movie. I was trying to think about others that really kind of come to mind of like, oh, what movies do I love to sit down and watch? But it's kind of all in that realm for me, at least.
Yeah, and the problem is with me lately, I just haven't watched enough good movies. Like I haven't watched enough movies, period. Oppenheimer was amazing. I don't know if I would put it like way up there on my terms of list. I need to watch it a few more times to solidly put it up there. And like it's kind of like dramatic. I liked a little bit more like either sci-fi or lighthearted movies for it to be that way instead of like a nonfiction film like Oppenheimer was. But yeah, like something like that, for example. Or if they were to come out with a new Star Wars movie, I'd probably watch it. It probably won't be as good, but I have bias, so it might be up there.
Right. Yeah, I'd probably watch it too. Yeah, I don't watch that many, I feel like, Oscar type movies, and I probably should, in the sense of, like, I saw Argo a while back, and that was good, but I like those type of movies. I feel like I don't sit down and watch that much. Those ones that are, in Oscar nominations and people like go out of their way to sit down in the theater and really watch. I guess like you, it's either lighthearted stuff or it's sci-fi that I watch. But hey, that's just who we are, I guess, right? So yeah. Well, that was a really good round of mailbag questions, I gotta say. Like round of applause to all our listeners and fans that sent in some really good ones. Like we say, like, we love answering Mariners questions, and there's always going to be a good handful of them included in these. But when people really kind of get out of the box and think hard about some creative questions for us, we always appreciate it, because I think they spark some creative answers. Hell, the two of us sat here and debated for 10 plus minutes or whatever it was about would you corral all the all-time great Mariners if it meant 20 years without a postseason drought, and we sat here debating it. So those questions are fun.
That was that was a fun one, dog. I mean, just telling you, I want to relive 2001 again. I want it.
I mean, I have no memory of it. I mean, not real memories of it. So yeah, I'd love to relive it, just not for 20 years without another postseason appearance. That's all. So shout out to all the listeners. Shout out to all the fans. You guys did a great job with these mailbags. When we keep doing mailbags, seriously, keep them coming, because these are really fun questions. With that, that'll just about wrap up this edition of the Marine Layer podcast. You guys know the drill. You want to listen to the full form podcast, make sure to download, rate and review 5 stars wherever you get your audio podcast. That's where you can listen across all podcast platforms. If you're on YouTube where you're watching, like, comment, and subscribe, and then follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube Shorts at Marine Layer Pod. That's TJ. I'm Lyle. As always, we thank you guys for tuning in. We'll talk to you soon.